Could it be? For me, you're me. Louie T, welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, I've been away for a little while, as I told you guys last week. And due to the fact that I was not here, obviously, news that we expected to transpire did exactly that. Eric Bieniemy named the offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. Also was given the title of assistant head coach. I told you guys that that would be something that he probably would require as well. I think I told you that roughly about 3 weeks ago. Thus, here we are. And when you're in a car riding for roughly 15 hours, you get a lot of time to do what I did, which is taking all of the different viewpoints of reactions to things that are transpiring. And one of the things that was a consistent theme, and we knew this was going to be the case, which was, you know, he should have been considered for one of the head coaching positions. You know, the race card was going to be thrown in. And I do think there's validity to all of that. And I've talked about that, and I'll probably talk more about it on the podcast. But that was something that was brought up constantly. The next thing was, guy's been on 15 different interviews, hasn't gotten any jobs. What's the deal? I've talked about the pros and cons, and we're going to get into that really deep tonight. We're really going to dive into Eric Bieniemy. Who is Eric Bieniemy? What are we getting potentially? We don't know what we're getting, but we're going to start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and we're going to try to project what exactly are we getting in Eric Bieniemy. I love the hire, and there's going to be things said on both sides, and we're going to talk about all of that, because my job isn't to persuade you one way or the other. It's to present you with all of the information and allow you to draw your own conclusion. And so that's exactly what we're going to do tonight, is we're going to talk about Eric Bieniemy. We're going to talk about his hiring rather. The press conference for Eric Bieniemy is set up for Thursday at, I believe, 11. So we'll hear from him for the first time as a member of this organization. And I think I know what that message is going to sound like, but I want to hear it from him. And we'll be live Thursday night, so we'll be able to break down that interview, that press conference, and really kind of dive into what our first impressions of Eric Bieniemy as, you know, Washington Commanders offensive coordinator, in terms of him speaking and the message that he's looking to deliver, was. So we'll get into that on Thursday. But I think the first thing that I want to talk about is Eric Bieniemy being hired here. And I want to talk about the narratives that are out there. Some people you talk to or some people you listen to are telling you it's a fantastic hire. You're getting a guy that helped the Chiefs, have the number one offense, pretty much each of the last 4 to 5 years. You minus Tyreek Hill, and you still have the best offense in football and win the Super Bowl. And this guy, ever since Patrick Mahomes got the nod as the starter in 2018, Eric Bieniemy's been the offensive coordinator, and the rest is history. So you got people that feel like he's a huge part of the success of what the Chiefs have been able to do offensively. Thus, he should be thrusted into a head coaching position, and he should not be subjected to making what is essentially a lateral move to be the offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. Then there's another vantage point. Guy isn't necessarily a play caller, doesn't necessarily have the chops to get it done in Washington. There's a reason why he hasn't been hired as a head coach anywhere. And there's a reason why he really hasn't been, looked at as an offensive coordinator anywhere else either. And I don't think he's really been pursuing those jobs aggressively, not until this offseason at least. However, the fact that he's gone on so many interviews, upwards of 15 different interviews and still has not gotten a gig is alarming to some. Off-putting even, to the point where they think there's something wrong here, and we're going to find that out eventually in the upcoming season. We won't know until the games start and we get our first real taste of Eric Bieniemy and we see what he brings, if there's any value that he brings to the table. We'll see what his style of play calling is, how he adapts to the talent that he'll be given, because there is talent here in Washington, despite what some may tell you or lead you to believe. If you've watched this team over the last 3 years, you've seen this team evolve offensively from a talent perspective to now feel like we shouldn't be scoring 18 points per game. The points per game and the output of this offense, to me, isn't reflective of the skill position players that exist on this roster. Obviously, quarterback has a lot to do with the lack of production. Obviously, the offensive line deterioration has a lot to do with what Washington did this past season. But I think the biggest problem we all had with this football team from an offensive standpoint was the play calling. So if you fix that, and the quarterbacking is slightly better, doesn't even have to be significantly better. If it's slightly better and consistent over the span of 17 games, if the defense is any good, you'd expect an uptick in not only victories, but point production and offensive efficiency. Thus, let's dive into Eric Bieniemy, what the hire here means. First of all, it's a big hire. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Look, he ran out of options. That's semi-true, okay? I talked about this. When the Ravens decided to go with Todd Monken, that for all intents and purposes was it in terms of interest. Now, there are other teams that had offensive coordinator positions available. Arizona and Philadelphia and Indianapolis at the time. There were teams that had just hired head coaches, Arizona and Indianapolis in particular. And because one of those teams, Indianapolis, poached away Philadelphia's offensive coordinator to make him their next head coach, that opened up a vacancy in Philadelphia. So there were some openings around the league at the time when he selected Washington. But for all intents and purposes, this was the destination that made the most sense, the team that wanted him the most. And he had already made it abundantly clear, wherever he was going to end up, he wanted it to be a team with a defensive-minded head coach. Washington checked off a lot of boxes. There's also the piece of information that Bieniemy was attracted to Sam Howell. That was part of what helped him decide that Washington was the right place. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But I want to start with some of the different narratives, okay? So we talked about what Shady McCoy had to say. Last week, we talked about an opinion that Shady McCoy had that really was from last year. And I told you it was from May of last year. And it really just started to gain traction now because Eric Bieniemy's name was starting to float and be boundied about for potentially a head coaching position, but more likely than not an offensive coordinator position. And so that quote that he gave over a year ago, or close to a year ago now, started to resurface. I'd also, gave you the tweet that he had when Mahomes and Bieniemy got into it prior to halftime in a week 3 contest this past season. against Indianapolis, a game that they would ultimately lose. And they had to be separated right before the half. And Shady McCoy made a comment, after retweeting that video, essentially attacking Bieniemy and saying that he doesn't know anything about offense. Shady McCoy doubled down on his doubt for Eric Bieniemy. And I know a lot of you have seen this, but again, my job isn't to assume anything. I know most of you have seen this. A lot of you tweeted it at me, made sure that I was aware of this. But for those of you who aren't on social media, who don't keep up with the day-to-day minutia of all these different things that are going on, here's what Shady McCoy said on, I want to say it's called First Things First or something like, I don't know the names of these shows, man. Okay. Anyway, he's a regular on one of these shows on Fox Sports 1. And I want you to take a listen to Shady McCoy as he doubles down on his doubt about Eric Bieniemy and his new role here in Washington. So the question that you're going to hear the answer to from Shady McCoy, okay? The question was phrased to him, does he think that Eric Bieniemy is going to fail in Washington? First of all, I hate the way the question was phrased, but that's nor here nor there. Emmanuel Acho decided to phrase the question in that manner, and thus he was asked, does he feel like Eric Bieniemy is going to fail in Washington? Here's Shady McCoy being shady.
I hope he doesn't, but I think he will. What's his value? What makes him a good offensive coordinator? See, the problem is a lot of these people that go on social media, oh, he should be the guy for the job. They haven't played there. They're not in the locker room. I've been in the rooms where he's coaching, and he has nothing to do with the pass game at all, right? When the plays are designed, that's Andy Reid. When you talk about offensive coordinators, I can tell you what makes Brian Daboll with the Giants a very, very good coordinator. I can tell you what Andy Reid or Doug Peterson. But when I ask about Eric Bieniemy, what makes him good? When we watch the film or practices and we correct the wide receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks, he doesn't talk in there. Andy Reid talks in there. He may say things to the running back because he's an ex-running back coach. I get that. But he has no real responsibility. Now you go from the Chiefs, where you can hide behind Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. Then you go to the Washington, where you got to call plays. You got to run the meetings. You got to run the installs. And last issue I have with him is, what makes Andy Reid so great, not the play calls, which we see that, which, I mean, that's one of it. But the other thing is, like, adapting to the players. With Bieniemy, my first practice, I couldn't believe it. He dog coaching, he dog cussing the players. I'm like, and not just the regular players, Kelsey, other players. So it's like, it's hard for me. I'm rooting for him because he's a black coach, and I love to see black coaches win. Also, he's a running back coach. Running back coaches don't never get a chance to be offense coordinators. The last one was like Anthony Lynn. So I want that to do well for him. But if I have to do my job and be honest, my thing is just, where is the true value at?
Is it have anything to do with him being black, in your opinion? Obviously, you ain't Roger Goodell. You don't know him.
You know what? Absolutely not. But people want to win. The color thing, I get it. It should be more black coaches. I definitely believe that. But if you come up for the Chiefs, they want to win. It has nothing to do with the color barrier at all.
So Shady McCoy doubles down on his doubt on Eric Bieniemy becoming an offensive coordinator. And his basis for the statement that he made was essentially 1 year back in 2019, when he was a part of the Kansas City Chiefs, where he was benched late in the season, wasn't a part of the postseason run, wasn't a part of the Super Bowl victory, and essentially his career was ended, and he did not really care for the way that Bieniemy spoke to players, including himself. And he did not feel like Eric Bieniemy had any offensive chops other than his background as a former running back himself and a running backs coach in the league. Remember, he was the running backs coach at his alma mater in Colorado for the Buffaloes. He was a running backs coach at UCLA. He was a running backs coach for the Minnesota Vikings. He was a running backs coach for the Kansas City Chiefs for a number of years before being promoted in 2018 to offensive coordinator. So if you take Shady McCoy at face value, he talked about all of the different guys that he had played for that he knew were very talented play callers, and he could identify why they were talented play callers. Okay, Giants head coach, Brian Daboll. Jaguars head coach, Doug Peterson. Chiefs head coach, Andy Reid. He's played for all of them. He can identify why these guys are good play callers, what their strengths are. Doesn't feel like Eric Bieniemy has any. Now, if you take Shady McCoy at face value, you're making a dangerous assumption. The assumption is, mind you, Shady McCoy spent 1 year with Eric Bieniemy back in 2019, his second year as an offensive coordinator. Shady makes a claim that he didn't speak up in meetings. He wasn't correcting receivers, tight ends, or any other position other than running back, because that's his background. If you take Shady for his word, then you're assuming that Eric Bieniemy can't get better, did not get better as an offensive coordinator. As the years progressed, as he got more and more comfortable, again, year 2 of being an offensive coordinator, after years of being a running backs coach at every single stop. Second year as an offensive coordinator, he's sitting in a meeting or meetings that year, maybe not saying much. Maybe Andy Reid's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Maybe he's not helping with the install back in 2019. Maybe his role isn't as significant back then. I'm not doubting that Shady McCoy isn't accurate in those things that he said. But that doesn't mean in 2020 or 2021 or this past season in 2022 that Eric Bieniemy's role hadn't expanded, that his voice wasn't much bigger, much broader, much more impactful, that he didn't have a much bigger role, that he wasn't helping with install, that he wasn't making adjustments during team meetings and addressing mistakes. You're assuming that he stayed stagnant and did not grow as an offensive coordinator after 2019. I think that is a very dangerous assumption to make, which is what Shady McCoy is insinuating. So while Shady McCoy may be giving us what was true back in 2019, I do not think that that is what is the case in 2022. However, let's look at some things that have been said from others, because that's one perspective, right, that we've gotten. Okay. Want to take a listen, or rather a look, at some players that have defended Eric Bieniemy. You start with Jamal Charles, okay, who responded to the clip that you just heard on Twitter. Shady McCoy posted it to his Twitter page, that 2-minute clip from the show. And Jamal Charles saw the clip, retweeted it, and had this to say: "I have to disagree with you, Shady. Bieniemy coached me for 4 years. I learned so many things from EB, and I still keep in contact with him. A great husband and father. He deserves to be a head coach." So a lot of what people had to say about this comment was, that's cool, but you didn't refute anything that Shady McCoy had to say. Jamal Charles goes on to say, and these are separate interviews. Okay, this is a tweet from today. This is an interview from 2021. This is from, again, Jamal Charles, former Chiefs running back who spent time in Kansas City while Eric Bieniemy, as he said, 4 years, was there, okay? Wherever he goes, he's going to bring out the best in all of his players, Charles told CBS Sports in 2021. He's going to push them to a level they didn't even know they had. He's a great coach that coaches the details. I want you to keep that last bit of information, that last bit of that quote, and I want you to store it in your memory bank. Okay? Details is the specific word I want you to hone in on. Okay? Charles also wrapped up his sentiments with this. His conclusion after spending 4 seasons with Bieniemy, every guy Eric Bieniemy touches, he raises their game, whoever they are. Close quote. Okay? So that is Jamal Charles. We then hear from Adrian Peterson, AD, former Vikings running back, former Commanders or Redskins running back, former Saints, ... all the teams that he's played for. He was with Bieniemy when Bieniemy was the running backs coach in Minnesota during AD's prime years. He writes, quote, he prides himself on details and execution. This is from 2019. Adrian Peterson was speaking with The Athletic. He's old school, man. He played running back in the day. So, of course, he's one of those guys that is all for the run first mentality. But he's definitely one of those people that wants to get the most out of his players. Once again, he prides himself on details. Details. Okay, that's the second player that has mentioned the word details. All right. So this might scare some of you from Adrian Peterson back in 2019 that he's old school. I told you, Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy see the game the same way. Bieniemy played in college in the 80s into the 90s. He was in the NFL in the early 90s with the Chargers and then the Browns. And so he sees the game a lot of the same way that Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio do. Okay. Doesn't mean that he's going to come here and want to run it on a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay. But he's an ex-running back. Keep that in mind. Okay. Details. Keep that word in mind as well. Details. Okay. Then we go to another comment. This one is from Maurice Jones-Drew, MJD. He ran across Eric Bieniemy at UCLA. Bieniemy was the running backs coach there in the early 2000s. Maurice Jones-Drew was a running back / kick returner for the Bruins in the early 2000s before getting drafted into the NFL. And this is what he had to say. Now, his style of coaching isn't for everyone to like. We've heard this before. We heard this from Logan Paulson, who said he demands a lot of his players, but he's a good coach, but he can be a little abrasive. We heard this from Shady McCoy. We heard this from Le'Veon Bell. People have spoken up and said that this guy, and again, listen to the people who have a problem with Eric Bieniemy's coaching style. All right. You heard Shady McCoy say that no one was immune. I would have a problem if he only spoke to certain players in that manner. Okay. I would have a problem if he wasn't an equal opportunity offender. Anybody at any point can get it because that's how you set a standard. Bill Belichick isn't letting up on Tom Brady or Rob Gronkowski or Teddy Bruschi or Mike Vrabel or Randy Moss. He's not letting up on anybody because if he'll talk to Tom Brady that way, he'll talk to you that way. And McCoy said he was talking to Travis Kelce, all kinds of crazy. Well, you know what? If he'll talk to Kelce that way, that means he'll talk to the third string tight end that way. He'll talk to the backup left tackle that way. He'll talk to the starting center that way. That's what you want. Some guys can handle it. Some guys can't, which takes us back to Maurice Jones-Drew's quote from 2021. He says, now his coaching style isn't for everyone to like. It's not to be liked. It's to make sure that you're the best player that you can be. Close quote. This is from MJD in 2021. Now, if you remember Patrick Mahomes, he talked about Eric Bieniemy, and I played you the soundbite, multiple sound bites of Patrick Mahomes talking about accountability and Eric Bieniemy holding him accountable, holding him to the fire, forcing him to be the best version of himself. You're hearing that again from Maurice Jones-Drew. Maurice Jones-Drew says he's trying to make you be the best player that you can be. Adrian Peterson says he's definitely one of those people that wants to get the most out of his players. Jamal Charles says wherever he goes, he's going to bring the best out in all of his players. Common thread there. Now, also keep in mind, all of these guys are running backs. So you start to think to yourself, this is great information, but they're all at the running back position, his position of expertise. Where's the tight end? Where's the quarterback? Where's someone else to substantiate that this guy is a hell of a coach, other than the position that he's the most comfortable coaching, which is running back? We'll get to that. Just know that details are important. Getting the most out of players is important. And so far, running backs seem to speak very highly of Eric Bieniemy. All right? So, now, you've gotten that part of the conversation. Now, I want to take a look at another part of the conversation. Okay? This information I wasn't privy to. Now, some of you might have been all over this, but I was looking for someone to give me a concrete acknowledgement of Eric Bieniemy contributing to offensive game planning or adjustments or something of the sort that had nothing to do with the run game, because Shady McCoy's claim was that he's got nothing to do with anything other than the run game. Knows nothing about the pass game, doesn't impact play calling, doesn't impact adjustments or anything of the sort. He's just a figure at the position. Andy Reid's pulling all the strings. That's what a lot of people think. And even with that said, and the problem that I have with that is we've seen guys that haven't called a single play get head coaching jobs and that not be an issue, that they didn't call a play. And we've gone through this already. You know, Matt LaFleur didn't call a single play. Zach Taylor didn't call a single play. All right. Other coaches on the Andy Reid tree didn't call a single play. All right. Matt Nagy, when he got the Bears job, was under Andy Reid as the OC. The same exact position that Eric Bieniemy was thrusted into when Nagy got the job in Chicago. He wasn't calling the plays in Kansas City. He was in the same position that Eric Bieniemy was in, but he got the job in Chicago. Doug Peterson wasn't calling the plays under Andy Reid in Philadelphia. Or in Kansas City, but he got the job in Philadelphia. Anyway, want you to take a listen. And I don't go to these shows very often, but again, people send me things, and I felt like this was an appropriate clip for you to hear from Undisputed. I want you to listen to Shannon Sharpe as he talks about a specific player that makes mention of a contribution in the biggest game of the year by Eric Bieniemy. Take a listen.
Now they said, Chad Henne said the 2 touchdowns, that was EB. He said he saw something Jacksonville did.
And he saw it.
He
on
said
motion.
On motion. Because a lot of times they're either going to run the shallow or they're going to run the jet sweep. Well, in order to get the jet sweep, Skip, you have to get another man over the top. But you're going to need to pass that off. Okay, I'm going over the top. Well, it seemed like on both plays, everybody was trying to go over the top, and they left 2 guys uncovered and walk-in touchdowns. Now, Henne and Skip, Andy Reid has gone out of his way. You see him at the end of the game? The way he hugged EB and said, I love you, man.
Yeah, he did. So did Patrick. Yep.
Skip, going out of his way.
Yep.
He says, I want to give Eric Bieniemy credit for the game plan.
So I had no idea that Chad, blame it on the Henne, who just recently retired but had been the backup quarterback in Kansas City for the past 3 or 4 seasons, made the statement that those adjustments down inside the 5-yard line on those 2 touchdowns, when you got that jet motion action on those touchdowns where those receivers went in motion and then stopped, pivoted, and came back to the outside, that resulted in 2 wide open walk-in touchdowns. Those adjustments were made by Eric Bieniemy. He saw something on film with the Jacksonville Jaguars when they had played Philadelphia earlier this season. And he'd seen how the Eagles had played that motion. And they saw that their tendency was to try to go over. So in order to confuse them, to make it look like it's a jet sweep or a quick little shovel from Mahomes, which is something that we see very, very consistently from the Chiefs, very frequently, down inside the 5. They gave them that motion, but instead of going all the way across the formation, they stopped, pivoted, and turned outside. And Bieniemy knew that the Eagles were going to react the way that they did. And it turned out to be 2 of the biggest plays of the game. That was Eric Bieniemy, according to Chad Henne. That's an important piece of information that I was not privy to. I didn't hear Chad Henne make that reference. We heard Andy Reid after the Super Bowl, and I mentioned this, give credit to Eric Bieniemy, but he also gave credit to other coaches as well. But that was an important piece of information. But I said, I still want a little bit more. I want to hear from some other guys. We heard from Patrick Mahomes. Shady's talking about how Bieniemy was talking to Kelsey. I'd like to hear from him. Well, we did. So this was after Shady McCoy talked about Travis Kelce being yelled at by Eric Bieniemy and how he didn't feel like Bieniemy was respecting some of the players on the team by the way he was speaking to them. Here's Travis Kelce's response to that. Quote, I think everyone has their own personal relationships in their journey throughout life, Kelce says. I know some people that have said bad things about others that I have absolutely adored. I think this would be a situation like that. I don't know what was said if Shady McCoy said bad things about him being Bieniemy. I know I have a great relationship with Eric Bieniemy. I have even butted heads with him. But at the same time, I know what Bieniemy is about. That guy is about working hard for the whole of the team and making sure that everybody is accountable. On top of that, he's just a passionate guy. He's a competitor, one of the best competitors that I have ever met because of how hard he works and how much attention to detail he has. Closed quote. Okay. So here we go again with another guy using 2 critical words that we've heard over and over again when referencing Eric Bieniemy. Accountability, detail. Okay. These are important for a team that has lacked attention to detail for so long. These are important attributes to have, things that we should be looking for in our next offensive coordinator. Hell, our next head coach, potentially. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. And you know how I am. When something like this transpires, when Washington makes a big move, I dive all the way in. Remember last year when Washington acquired Carson Wentz? What did I go and do? I went and watched the entire season of Hard Knocks in season with the Indianapolis Colts. Why? To get a better picture of who Carson Wentz was, not just as a player, because you really weren't going to get that from that, show. I was looking to see who Carson Wentz the person was, because although they're not going to show anything negative, you still can see if someone's genuine or not. You get a vibe from a guy. And we saw how his teammates reacted when he was traded and how sincere they were in saying that they wished him well and that they felt like he should not have been traded, right? So I came away from that saying, I don't think Carson Wentz is going to be a problem here as a teammate. We heard that as an issue at his last 2 stops. Not a great teammate. Could be a bit of a divisive force in the locker room. He was anything but. Had guys over at his house for Thanksgiving. Hell, even the guy that was in the process of taking his job while he was injured. Had him over for Thanksgiving. Brought guys together. Gave up his box to Sam Howell's family when he made his first start of his career. Like, Wentz was anything but a distraction in the locker room. And I was able to gather that watching Hard Knocks. So I had my guy, Sean Blake, hit me up. I'm going to read you what he sent me. And Sean Blake sent me this 5 days ago when I did the live stream last week before I left. And I read this and I was captivated by it. And so here's what Sean Blake wrote me. Interesting tidbit, Lou. There is an ESPN 30 for 30 doc about that 1990 Colorado Buffs championship team where EB was called, was the running back. Okay, he was the starting running back of that team, called The Gospel According to Mac. And I had seen that 30 for 30 and I just skipped past it because it didn't resonate at that moment to me. It didn't speak to me. He said that Coach McCarthy was a very religious man, and when they asked him what his best attribute to his players was, he actually answered, and I'm paraphrasing, I hold players accountable. I bet that has heavily influenced EB's coaching philosophy. So I went and my response, and I responded to him. And I said, damn, I saw that 30 for 30. And I said, nah, not interested. Now I am. I will watch it. Thanks for the heads up. Well, I went and watched it. And I got a clearer picture of Eric Bieniemy, the player, the person, and how, as Sean Blake described, how he was shaped and molded as human beings. We are all shaped and molded by life experiences, our environment, things that we've seen, things that have been done to us. These things shape and mold who we become, whether you like it or not. You might tell yourself, I never want to be like my dad, or I never want to be like my mom. So then you go to the other end of the spectrum, right? So far that sometimes now you're extreme the other direction. Like, I'm not going to beat my kids because my mom beat the hell out of me as a kid. I'm not going to discipline my kids that way. So now your kids are running all over you potentially because you swore that you wouldn't put your hands on them. And not every parent has to parent that way. But that experience may have forced you to go in the opposite direction. Or it might have had the opposite effect and you say, hey, I turned out great. My mom was a strict disciplinarian, and anytime she saw fit, she would put her hands on me. She would put the paws on me. And I won't hesitate to do the same with my kid. Whatever the case may be, you're shaped and molded by the things that either occurred to you, that you've seen, that environment that you grew up in, the things that you've done, things that you've seen, those things shape and mold you. Eric Bieniemy was affected by his coach in college, who was very religious, held his players accountable. It's a great documentary. I was captivated by this thing. But it gives you a nice picture of why you hear people talk about attention to detail. You hear people talk about accountability. That coach held not only his players, but the entire state of Colorado, the specific city of Boulder, Colorado, that university, he held everybody accountable. The players, specifically the black players on that roster, weren't being treated fairly. They were being miscast and typecast as thugs. And they threatened to transfer, and he got everybody, he being Coach McCarthy, got everybody straight with the help of one of the professors at Colorado. So Bieniemy took a lot of what he learned there, and I think that's part of his coaching style. So you get a better sense of, okay, I can see where this starts to come from. We've heard from Travis Kelce, loved Eric Bieniemy. We heard from Patrick Mahomes, loved Eric Bieniemy. These are the guys that Shady McCoy swore that he couldn't be a good coach because he's talking to these guys sideways. Those guys may not have loved it in the moment, but they appreciate, and players know when you're genuine. Like, you can, if you've got that sense, and a lot of times players have that sense of when coaches really care about them. You've got guys that are just assholes because they're just assholes, and then you got guys that are assholes because they want what's best for you. At the end, you realize it was all love. In the moment, it felt like he was being an ass. Again, as Maurice Jones-Drew said, that may not be for everyone. But he's looking to get the best and the most out of guys who have talent. I can get with that, especially for a team that I feel like has underachieved many a years here in Washington. Haven't gotten the most out of some of the talent that they have had. There'll be a breath of fresh air. Now, I wanted to address one more thing. So, my guy, King of the North, hit me up on Twitter, as he often does, and he had something to say. And I want to read you what he had to say. So, this is from our guy, King of the North, right? King of the North writes, Sheehan, he's talking about Kevin Sheehan, host of the Kevin Sheehan show podcast, which you can get anywhere podcasts are found. And he's also a host of a radio program. I think it's early in the morning. I don't know. I don't listen. But I think it's on ESPN 980, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, King of the North writes, Sheehan has been getting on my nerves lately. He's just against anything the team does. He was critical of the Wentz trade, critical of starting Heineke, critical of firing Scott Turner. He's been heavily outspoken against starting Howell next season. He's been the most critical local media personality of the Bieniemy hire, too. Kevin just cannot get over those 15 head coaching interviews. I always used to like him because I thought he was a voice of reason. I don't know if I've changed or he has. There's more, but I want to stop there for a second. So I'll just tell you right now. First of all, I have no idea what you're referring to. I listened to his podcast, but I listened to it in order. During the season, I'm not able to get to his podcast because I'm too busy. So I usually listen to his podcast in the off season, preferably when I'm at the gym. That said, I can tell you right now, I'm on the Indianapolis Colts game. The week after that game, heading into the the Vikings game. After we just beat the Colts. That's where I am in his podcast. And I don't skip over anything. So I'm not even remotely close to where you are in terms of listening. That said, I can tell you this right now. He hasn't changed a bit. You have. Okay? Your line of thinking has changed. He's always been hypercritical of the organization. He's always been of the mindset that this team will never win anything of importance until Dan Snyder is gone. And I think most of us agree with that sentiment. Now, you can try to convince yourself that if we get the right quarterback or the right coach or play caller, this, that, and the third, that, maybe, just maybe, we can offset a guy like Dan Snyder's impact. But the likelihood is you may catch lightning in the bottle, which this organization, coincidentally enough, has not. Even Jacksonville caught lightning in a bottle and went all the way to the AFC Championship game. All right. The Arizona Cardinals caught lightning in the bottle and went all the way to the Super Bowl. Teams that you don't expect to win at that level have caught lightning in the bottle, won double-digit games, made it to the divisional round, or even the championship game, or hell, even to the Super Bowl. And we still have not won more than 10 games and have not advanced past the divisional round since Daniel Snyder took over this organization, and we've been one of the worst organizations. That said, Kevin Sheehan has also been adamant about one thing. He's really big on when others definitively uninterested in a player for whatever reason, he is one that takes a step back and says, why is that? There must be something wrong here. That's how he felt about Alex Smith. That's how he felt about Carson Wentz. That's how he feels about Eric Bieniemy. He hasn't changed. He said there's a reason Carson Wentz was passed over by two different organizations in the last two seasons. That's not coincidental. And we tried to blame it on Jim Irsay, and I still believe that was a Jim Irsay thing. Wentz wasn't that bad. He wasn't great down the stretch, but he wasn't that bad to where they had to get rid of him. Irsay was pissed off because he got COVID late in the season. He wouldn't get the shot. And because he got COVID, he didn't play well down the stretch, and they blamed him for the collapse of that season. Anybody that was paying attention can identify that. And I think even Kevin Sheehan could admit that more likely than not, that's the reason, but he's not going to make any assumptions, and that's fine. I'm drawing inferences. That's what I do. But he was skeptical because two what he claimed to be good NFL organizations, which I question how good Indianapolis really is, but he termed it as two really good organizations, passed on a player. And in this league, if you got a quarterback that's any good, you're not going to give him up even if you don't love some of his beliefs. He turned out to be right about it. I didn't agree with everything that he had to say, but I get the rationale. It's the same rationale he's using here. I don't know if he was ever against starting Heinicke. Again, I'm not far enough to say that he is or isn't. But I know that he, like myself, has already ordained Taylor Heinicke as a backup. And if a guy is a backup quarterback, he's a backup quarterback. And I may get to the San Francisco game and then into the Browns game, and Kevin may be against keeping Heinicke in. I told you, I was all for Ron starting Wentz. I had no problems with it. He was looking for a spark. Heinicke's magic had run out at that point. I had no problems with him going to him. My issue was, once you saw that spark, there wasn't even a flicker. Once you saw that, first throw of the game is a pick. 2 possessions later, he throws another pick. Once you identified that this guy isn't giving you the spark that you had hoped, get him out of there. He didn't. That was my problem. He was too loyal to Carson Wentz, trying to prove that he hadn't made a mistake, that he got the right guy. All of that film that he watched, all the analytics and the numbers that he crunched, that Wentz was the guy. He didn't want to give up on that. He wanted to prove people wrong and prove himself right. He needed to put his ego aside and put Heinicke back in the game and sit Wentz down once and for all. But Sheehan was always an advocate of, I'm not sure about this guy because other teams that I think, organizations that I think are run among the best in the league, decided that this guy wasn't any good and we need to move on from him. So there's something off. And he looks at Eric Bieniemy's 15 interviews, and look, any rational person will say, well, damn, what's the deal here? Now, I'm black, so I'm going to have a bit of a different perspective on Eric Bieniemy and why he hasn't gotten a job. Kevin Sheehan is not black. So he may just look at it as 15 times he's been interviewed, 15 times he has not been offered a job, something's off. Color of his skin could just be what's off, if you know what I mean. But that's nor here nor there. In his mind, the way it operates, 15 interviews, no hires equals something's amiss. And again, if we're deleting, and Shady McCoy said, I don't think it has anything to do with his color of his skin. And he's fair to feel that way. But if you're eliminating color, race from this conversation, and you just look at the facts, and the facts are he's had 15 interviews and he hasn't gotten a head coaching job, it's very rational to say something's amiss. It's not as cut and dry. It's not as easy. This is, to me, more complex than 15 interviews, no hire means something's wrong. And there's more to it than that. But in any event, that's always been Kevin Sheehan's stance, is when teams and organizations around the league speak, he listens. That's always been his thing. I don't know if he was critical of Scott Turner being fired. I wasn't. And again, I haven't gotten that far in the process. And maybe when I get to that portion of his podcast and I hear him speak, I'm like, He's always felt like Scott Turner. I shouldn't say always. For the most part, he's been a Scott Turner defender. And for a while there, I was as well. Because I felt like there were open receivers. There were guys that, if we had better quarterbacks, and there's been times this year where I've watched the film and I said, hey, better quarterbacking, and that's a touchdown, right? We talked about that with Heinicke. Logan Thomas against the Giants in the first game in the Meadowlands. First possession of the game. Logan Thomas is wide open. That shouldn't be a field goal. That should be a touchdown. He's open. He misses him. Second Giants game. Curtis Samuel is down the sidelines behind the coverage. Corner lets him go. There's no safety over the top. Heineke throws it up high. He's got to jump. Barely gets his feet down in bounds. It's a nice chunk play. Should have been a touchdown. We don't score any points on that possession and we lose the game. Better throw, that's a touchdown. We've had these discussions. But there are way more instances of bad play calling, lack of situational awareness, things of that nature than there were missed throws by receivers or, concepts that got guys wide open and the quarterback just didn't get the ball to him or the offensive line broke down. Anyway, I don't know what his stance was on firing Scott Turner, but Turner needed to go. Period. And if he disagreed with that, I think he's wrong. But going into the rest of the comment, King of the North writes, Sheehan says Ron gets zero credit for hiring EB because EB was basically desperate for a job. Kevin claims the entire NFL has rejected EB and Ron is the only sucker dumb enough to hire him. That's BS. Let's stop there. There's more to this comment, and we're going to get to it. That he says, if that's Kevin's perspective, that's his stance, I know people that feel the exact same way. Now, I don't agree with him in terms of the entire NFL has rejected Eric Bieniemy and Ron's a sucker for going and getting him. I think that there is a bit of desperation on the part of Eric Bieniemy. He was running out of options. We've had this discussion. I even said it. Like, he's running out. When Baltimore hired Todd Monken, I said he really doesn't have many options left. We're really the only chair left for him to sit in. Now, I told you there were other teams looking for offensive coordinators. He could have held out and said, you know what? I can do better than Washington. But could he really? I don't know. I don't know if he could have done better than Washington. But I don't think that the entire NFL has rejected him. I bet you if he would have made himself available to be an offensive coordinator, he would have gotten a job somewhere else. He was so fixated on getting a head coaching position, and he thought eventually I'm going to get one, that he wasn't even interested in being an offensive coordinator. I don't think it was until this offseason where he realized, yet again, I'm going to be passed over during another coaching cycle for a head coaching position, that I need to then go out, spread my wings, and become my own offensive coordinator to prove to everyone once and for all that I can do this, which his white counterparts haven't had to do. But in any event, that's the case. Had he made himself available to becoming an offensive coordinator 2-3 years ago, after the Chiefs won their first Super Bowl, I think he would have gotten another offensive coordinator gig. I truly believe that. But that's nor here nor there. There is a bit of, hey, he kind of fell into Ron's lap. I don't know if Ron, necessarily had to, woo him and was able to get him with 4 or 5 other teams beating down his door, and Ron was able to pry him away from those teams and get him here. There's a bit of, hey, he kind of fell into our lap. We talked about that already. But I don't think Ron's a sucker, and I don't think it's you can't say that Ron's dumb for hiring him. He says, EB has been rejected by some teams as a head coach, not an OC, which is the point I just made. KC is the best ran franchise in the NFL right now, and they promoted EB to OC and kept him there for 5 years. This guy is not Pat Shurmur, desperate to coach somewhere. NFL teams are going with younger coaches, and most didn't want to wait until after the Super Bowl to see if EB might be interested. Remember, EB was only taking head coach interviews at first. Ron rolled the dice and waited on EB, and the gamble paid off. Sheehan is just wrong, Lou. There's no such thing as a slam dunk hire in the NFL, but EB is a damn good hire. We're going to find out if he's a damn good hire. I love the hire because I want to take a chance on a guy that I believe deserves an opportunity, as does Ron, which takes me to my next conversation. Ron was adamant, and this is how I knew Bieniemy was going to be a guy that he targeted. Ron spoke about this on numerous occasions, about how he himself, as a minority candidate, had to interview 7 or 8 times before he finally got the job in Carolina. He knows what it's like to kind of be cast aside and shunned by the rest of the league because you're a minority. Ron said he thought it was absolutely disgusting, the fact that he's interviewed that many times, hasn't gotten a job. So you know Ron wants to be a part of helping Eric Bieniemy change the narrative and eventually get a job as a head coach. Ron wants to be a part of that process. Ron has been an advocate for minority coaches. Ron's a part of numerous boards in the NFL. So Ron is definitely a guy that feels like Eric Bieniemy has been wronged, and he wants to be a part of the process of him getting to wherever he ultimately needs to be. And he wants to help him right the ship and prove the rest of the NFL wrong, that this guy should have been a head coach a long time ago, which is what Ron said. So I knew Ron was going to essentially say, look, man, if you want it, the job's yours. I want you to come here and prove to everybody that not only do you belong as a head coach, but it should have happened a long time ago. So with all that said, all right, and Kevin Sheehan, just to wrap the thoughts of that whole conversation, he's a part of the family. We talk about this all the time. We're not always going to agree with family members. Okay? There are a lot of times you don't agree with me. It happens. We're not always going to agree, but we all want the same thing. Keep that in mind. All right? We don't always go about it the same way, but we all want the same thing. So I want to talk about what we should expect from Eric Bieniemy and the impact that that may or may not have on Ron Rivera. All right. So I want to start with something that I found rather interesting. All right. And this was from John Keim. So John Keim had a tweet the other day, and it reads as follows. This was sort of stunning. And when he said that, I was like, Then he says, but then again, not surprising. It's Washington. Nothing is stunning when it comes to Washington. Maybe on the outside looking in, you know, a fan of another team might see this stat and they go, oh my God, you guys have been inept offensively for the better part of 20 plus years. And if you're a fan of this team, you go, duh. Like, yeah, we have been. But for someone that's not a fan of the team, this might be stunning to them. It's not to me. And I guess it's stunning because you've got to be really inept. I mean, you've got to be borderline terrible and incapable of offensive production to put up these types of numbers. But then I think John realized it's Washington, and then he goes, it's not surprising because it is the Washington organization. Washington has averaged 20 points or more per game only 5 times since 2000. We've played 22 seasons, 23 if you include 2000 itself. But we've played 22 seasons since 2000. If you include 2023, we've only averaged 20 or more points 5 times. Ouch. They're 28th in points per game since that year. So you're pretty much one of the worst teams. You're in the bottom 8th of the league, which means you're the absolute worst in the last quadrant. All right, 8th of the league, the very bottom of points per game. They've averaged fewer than 18 points 12 times. They've averaged less than 18 points per game 12 times in 22 years. Wow. EB can provide a jump. He'll need help from others. Obviously, he can't do it by himself. But just let that sink in. And for years, specifically last year, I talked about the jump that we were hoping this offense would take with Carson Wentz under center. And we said, look, can't be much worse than we were on offense last year. Definitely can't be worse than we were the year before. We don't need this offense to be a juggernaut. We're not trying to be the Chiefs, not trying to be the Bills or the Bengals or one of these high-octane offenses that are putting up borderline 30, a game, 29.8 or 28.9. We just need to score 22 or 23 points a game. With the kind of defense that we're playing and the schedule that we were going to be playing, you scored 23 or 24 points. And we went through this exercise already. If Washington had scored X amount of points, and I think the number was something like 23 or something like that, in every single game, up until that point, I want to say it was like week 10 or 11. We would have been like, I think at that point, I think it was like week 7 or so, because it was after the brutal start to the season in which we weren't giving up a whole hell of a lot of points. We just weren't scoring a lot of points. And that was the problem, It's mind-boggling that in that stretch of football, we haven't been able to muster 20 points per game, but 5 times. And I talked about that last year. There's a lot of stats that you can look at, and, you get to Pro Football Focus and, Pro Football, and Outsiders and all of these different, statistical analytics-based sites and entities, and you can get lost in a lot of shit. But I told you one of the most important numbers when it's all said and done. You can talk to me about all this shit that you want. How many points per game are you scoring, man? And I get it. Special teams and defense, they contribute to that number. That's fine. We don't get many special teams touchdowns in the NFL anymore. The biggest special teams contribution you're probably going to get is from your field goal kicker and your punter. Punt coverages, kickoff coverages. How many kickoff returns for touchdowns? How many punt returns for touchdowns do we see in the NFL in a season? Maybe 3 punt returns, 4 punt returns for touchdowns, maybe 1 or 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns. They rarely happen anymore. And defensively, if you've got an opportunistic defense, you can score some touchdowns defensively or create some short fields for your offense that lead to points being scored. Absolutely. But for the most part, your offense is going to have to score points. And ours hasn't. And you're not going to win a lot of games scoring 17 points, which seems to be our signature calling card, right? Washington wins, and our signature is we take a business card as we're walking away, we flick it in the air, and it's 17 points, and it says, you just got Washington. 17-15. 17-16. You just got Washington. Well, the garbage teams in the league will allow you to Washington them. 12-10 7. Not beating any good teams doing that shit. So what we're looking for from Eric Bieniemy is to come in here, and we really don't give a shit how it's done. We would prefer our offense to be balanced, to be able to run the football consistently, to have a run game that mirrors the pass game. So when you run play action fake, it actually looks like you are running the football, which we haven't had in damn near a decade since Kyle and Mike Shanahan were here. Because Jay Gruden's play action fake looked nothing like, his run action fake looked nothing like his pass game. We were running duo. It's hard to run play action fake off of duo. That was his number one run play, duo. So our play action fake game was trash under Jay Gruden for 6 years. And then Ron gets here, hires Scott Turner, and he has no semblance of what run action fake, play action fake, what that shit should look like and how it marries up. We run the shit out of the football against some teams. And what was my biggest gripe for much of the season? We're running the football, we're getting chunks, and we're not getting chunk pass plays off of the success of the run game. How is that possible? I watched teams like the Rams and the Packers have minimal success running. The minute they get any success, the 49ers, the minute they get any success running the football, you're going to pay for it. Because your running backs, your linebackers are going to suck up. At the sight of that football being stretched out to that running back's belly, they're going to come up, and now you've got a window, that second window for 15 yards, for 17 yards. It's open. If that safety bites up on that second window throw, now you've got a window behind them for the big one. You just turned into Fred G. Sanford. Oh, my God. Elizabeth, this is the big one. We could never get any of that shit because Scott Turner had no concept of how to take advantage of the success he's having on the ground. Because our play action game was garbage. Didn't get better until the end of the season when he finally started going under center and we had the heavy play action fake, but we couldn't protect a lot of times for that shit. We wanted to put tight ends on edge rushers. Anyway, Eric Bieniemy, the first thing I'm looking for them to do, and this has nothing to do with Bieniemy, the first thing I'm looking for them to do is to come in and I need them to fix this offensive line. And I expect them to do that this offseason via the draft and free agency. I don't think it's a one or the other type of scenario. I think it's a combination of the two. 1 or 2 free agents, specifically on the interior of the offensive line, because those are relatively cheap in free agency. And then you go for the gusto in the draft by drafting maybe a tackle but definitely a guard. And if you want to tackle, knock yourself out. I wouldn't mind grabbing one of those as well. But after you fix the offensive line, I like the rest of the talent that resides on this team. I like what we have at running back. I think there's a lot more talent at tight end than you guys are giving this team credit for. I think there's something to Cole Turner. I am so intrigued by Amani Rodgers. And they really liked the kid out of Virginia Tech that got hurt. I forget his name. These big-ass kid, 6'7", 6'8". They really like him too, and John Bates, and then you still got Logan Thomas. We'll see if Logan Thomas gets released or not. But I don't think he will, but we'll see. He may get released. There's talent there. There's size. There's things you can do. There's athleticism for the first time in a long time with Turner and Amani Rodgers. We have stuff at tight end. And then I love our receivers. Love our receivers. So you fix that offensive line. Obviously, Sam Howell is the straw that's going to stir that drink. And if he's any good, we got a chance to be really good. If Eric Bieniemy is good. And so what I'm looking for from Bieniemy, first and foremost, we heard from players, accountability piece, attention to detail. We heard Chad Henne talk about that particular play in the Super Bowl and the attention to detail. I heard Jarrett McKinnon say, Eric Bieniemy constantly preaching in those situations, you have to get down. You cannot score a touchdown at the end of the game there. It is more important for you to get down and preserve the victory than for you to go in and score a touchdown and give a team like Philadelphia an opportunity to tie the football game up. You have to go down there. And he did. Attention to detail. You know, we've seen teams botch that situation late in the ball game. Not be able to stop themselves. Go out of bounds. Antonio Gibson, on more than one occasion, has run out of bounds in a late game situation when he needed to stay inbounds. It hasn't hurt us yet, but it could have. He's done it twice. There's no excuse for that, except a lack of attention to detail. So I expect attention to detail. I expect accountability. I expect better execution. But most of all, I'm expecting more fluidity amongst the offense. Plays that make sense, building upon a play that you ran earlier and had success with, coming back to that play if it works. They ran essentially, it wasn't exactly the same play. You listen to Andy Reid, it wasn't the exact same play. But for all intents and purposes, it was a similar concept. They ran it on one side, it worked. They ran it on the other side. And actually, if you listen to Inside the NFL, they had the audio. They ran the wrong formation. That guy, Sky Moore, wasn't even supposed to come in motion. Supposed to be the guy on the other side. They lined up on the wrong side. Sky Moore came in motion, and Patrick just said, F it. Shit, he's in motion. And they ran it, and he went back outside, and it worked. It was a similar concept, though. Attention to detail. Building on something that had worked in the past. So I expect them, our offense, to now make sense under Eric Bieniemy. Right? Plays that look like one another but are something different, whether it be a run earlier in the game and then off of that you get play action fake, or a wide receiver screen, a bubble to the outside, and then a fake bubble and up the sideline. We saw that in the Super Bowl. But most importantly, I want to see an offensive coordinator adapt his play calling to the talent that he has. And nobody, in my estimation, has done that better than the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't go out and get Kadarius Toney and ask him to go be a possession receiver like Juju Smith-Schuster. Nope. Juju Smith-Schuster is the possession receiver. That's the guy that's going to run the slant and take the shot over the middle of the field. That's the guy that's going to run the dig route. That's his skill set. Dirty work over the middle of the field. Physical at the point of catch. We're going to let Kadarius Toney work outside. Jet sweeps. Wide receiver screens. The catch he had for the touchdown where he comes in motion and then bubbles back out. Quick moves outside in space. That's his skill set. We're going to adapt and adjust to what he does. We didn't trade for him to make him something that he's not. We're going to take the pieces that we have. We're going to maximize them. They did it in Kansas City. I'd love to see us do it here in Washington. I think he can bring that here. So I'm looking forward to seeing what becomes of this situation. We have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. But again, as I mentioned, numerous times, I'm anxious to see what this is all about. So I'm gonna get to the comment section and then we'll come back to Ron Rivera, because I got a couple of things that I would like to say about him as well. But I got a super chat that was here before I got on. I don't know if it's still here. I don't think it is. So I want to read this one real quick. I think this one was here before I got here, and this is from Jason Fios. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Jason Fios, writes, "What's up, Lou? What's up, Jason? How's the family? Doing well. How's yours? Hope everything's good with you and yours. Everything on this side is just fine." He writes, "Glad to have Eric here, but my biggest concern is why didn't Andy make coach in waiting? Maybe Andy's not going anywhere. I mean, this isn't college, right? Unless you plan on retiring within the next 2 to 3 years. Like, Bill Belichick probably would love it if his son were the next head coach of the New England Patriots. Love to leave the organization in a great spot for his kid. He's been there. Love to just pass it on, almost like it's a family business or something. Mike Shanahan was doing that with Kyle here in Washington. He had every intention of getting Washington in a great spot and then passing the baton to his son. Obviously, that didn't go as planned here in Washington. That's what I was hoping for. Greg Williams was supposed to be the coach in waiting after Joe Gibbs retired in 2.0. Didn't happen that way. So it's tough in the NFL to have a coach in waiting unless you know good and well, hey, don't go anywhere. When I go, this is your gig. That's what happened in Tampa Bay. Todd Bowles, probably after they won the Super Bowl, he was probably as hot a coordinator as there was. And if he wanted to, he probably could have left and gotten a job somewhere. But he already knew. His guy, Bruce Arians, told him, bro, don't go anywhere. I'm not doing this for much longer. This is your job when I go. And they promoted him. Hasn't worked out for them, but you don't see that very often. That said, Andy Reid, I said this, and I might have jumped the gun when I said it, because there was talk of retirement. I had already said Andy's not retiring anytime soon. But he talked about, kind of mulling over that decision at one point. I don't think he was going to retire, but he already shot down any notion of retirement immediately after the Super Bowl. And it looks like they're going to promote Matt Nagy to offensive coordinator, which is what I said I thought would happen. Because Andy's not about holding on to guys. He's about getting guys back out there into the force as a coach. Not looking to hoard anybody as an offensive coordinator. Hey, go out there and get your own squad. Get your own, you heard? When I look at coaching waiting, I think about coaches that are up there in age who are ready to hang it up. And that Andy Reid's not a spring chicken. I don't see him retiring. But do you think Ron would step aside to save face for him to be the head coach here? No. Like, Ron's not looking to, ease his way into the next phase of his career, like broadcasting or, an upper management role. I've seen that so many times from fans, and I'm like, where are you getting this from? Like, Ron's no front office personnel guy. He's been a part of some good moves that have been made here, and I've talked about it. But remember, we started from the bottom. There was nowhere but up to go, essentially. We were terrible from a roster standpoint when he got here. The roster couldn't get any worse. So they made some shrewd moves. I'm not going to sit here and act like they didn't. And he was a part of some of the decision-making processes that brought those players here. And so he deserves credit for that. But when it's all said and done, Ron's not stepping aside. He loves Eric Bieniemy, glad that he's here. Wants Eric to get a head coaching gig, but not at his expense. So I don't foresee Ron, stepping aside or conceding anything or trying to help Eric Bieniemy be the head coach here in Washington. It's about helping Eric Bieniemy be the head coach of another team around the league because he was successful here in Washington. And by virtue of that, Ron would then secure his job, at least for another year or two. So thank you for that super chat, Jason Fios. Let's see. Reedy Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Reedy writes, what's up, Lou? What's up, Reedy? You think Eric B can make the offense top 20 or better? Honestly speaking, it's low-hanging fruit, but that's really all he has to do is get it inside of the top 20. Okay? Every year we look up and our offense is 27th or worse in the league. We're one of the worst offenses every single year. At this point, all he really, truly has to do is get that thing inside the top 20, preferably around 16, 15, 16, 17, somewhere in that neighborhood. Means you're right in the middle of the pack. If you're playing the kind of defense that we've played 2 out of the 3 years under Ron, and in 2020 and in 2022, the defense was good enough to win double-digit games in both seasons. Problem was the offense was horrible in both seasons. And so we weren't able to achieve that. If you are able to get this offense inside the top 20, we're going to have a shot. Do I think he's capable of that? Yes, I do. But again, it's hard to say that without seeing what improvements they make on the offensive line, having to see Sam Howell and his growth and development. This is going to be another offense for him to have to learn. So that could be problematic for Sam. We'll see. Not building on, what he was doing a season ago. But we still don't know what Eric Bieniemy is as a play caller either. So we'll find that out as well. But I think he can make this a top 20 offense. Tony P56, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Tony P writes, welcome back, Lou. Glad to be back, man. Appreciate you. I'm over here waiting on 9:30 like TGIF back in the day. Did y'all remember that block, man? Started off with Family Matters, then it was Step by Step. I forgot what was at the 9 o'clock block, but I remember those were the two to start it off, 8 and 8:30. My block, though, was the Thursday night Fox block with Martin at 8, Living Single at 8:30, and then New York Undercover at 9. That was my shit, but I digress. EB to DC makes sense with the defense. Head coach, but everybody hating except Ryan Clark. So it makes sense with a defensive head coach. And you're getting a lot of pushback. You're getting a lot of people that, and Shady McCoy is leading the charge. He's not alone, though. There are a lot of people that don't necessarily believe in Eric Bieniemy. I think there are more people that do think he's gotten a raw deal than not. But there are some people out there that think, hey, this guy's been interviewed X, amount of times, hasn't gotten a gig. There's something amiss here, So we'll see what happens. Really appreciate you as always. Tony P 56. Swaggy P, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy Swaggy P writes, welcome back, Lou. Thank you, man. Feels good to be back. Feels good. Says, I love the EB hire as well. I just hate how negative people have been about it outside the franchise. LeSean McCoy is an EB hater, and I will take his opinion with a grain of salt, as you should. I don't think you can just dismiss everything that he says, but I do think you have to understand where his opinion is coming from. It's coming from a place of discontentment. It's coming from a place of, I won't call it hatred. That's a strong word, but it's coming from a place of, really being, sour. He's salty. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's coming from a place of saltiness, Wasn't happy how his career ended, and he felt like Eric Bieniemy was abrasive. And we've heard players say, hey, he can be a bit of abrasive. But what's ironic, if you watch the 30 for 30, in that championship season in 1990, they were on the road at Nebraska, and he fumbles the ball. He being Eric Bieniemy fumbles 4 times. First of all, in today's NFL, after your second fumble, you're not getting another touch. He fumbled 4 times. Now, this was just a terrible weather game. It's raining sideways. They got hail, and it's Nebraska in November. Like, trust me, it's cold as shit, damn near snowing, but it's raining. And it's like sleet as well. But he was fumbling. He fumbled 4 times in the game. Somehow they still won. He fumbled 4 times, and then he scored 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, which was a Colorado record, and still a Colorado record for most touchdowns scored by one player in a single quarter. That said, he was having a terrible game, and teammates were coming over to him trying to console him, and he didn't want to hear it. And he said the thing that calmed him down in that game was one of his teammates took him aside, put his arm around him, and he told him, EB, we're going to win this game, and we're going to need you to do it. Pretty much stay locked in. And he said that was a calming influence on him. And then he went out and scored 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And they overcame a 12-0 deficit and won like 27-12. EB's not, as far as I know, listening to people, he's not putting his arm around people and telling them, hey, we need you. Keep your head in the game. He's telling you to get your head out of your ass. Okay? Focus. So that's somewhat ironic, but the common theme from that particular documentary is that, and you heard Travis Kelce talk about him being one of the most intense coaches and one of the most competitive coaches he's ever been around. That was the common theme of his teammates in talking about Eric Bieniemy as a player, most competitive guy on the team. Just refusing to lose. And they told a story about a game that they were losing against Texas in that 1990 season where he grabs the entire offense as the defense is having the ball walk down the field on them in a game that they're losing like 16-10. And if Texas scores this touchdown, it's pretty much lights out. And it's the end of the third quarter, and he takes the entire offense out on the field to talk to the defense and essentially tells the defense, hey, get this stop. You get this stop, and we're gonna take it from there. We're gonna win this game. But y'all gotta do y'all job first, and you do your job, and we'll do our job. I guarantee you, you get this stop, and we're gonna win this game. And the defense held them to a field goal. They scored 2 straight touchdowns. They ended up winning the game. And so he's a leader. He's competitive. These are all traits that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking for. Can't speak for anybody out there, but I'm looking for those things. You know, Shady is salty. So, again, take it with a grain of salt. I think it's the right way to approach it. But I think you're doing Eric Bieniemy a disservice if you just think he's stuck in 2019's, you know, frame of mind, where he might not have been as, you know, vocal in 2019 in his second year as an offensive coordinator. He might not have been a part of installs, or might not have been, you know, a big adjustments guy at that point. But he grew. He got better. That's the assumption. So thank you for the super chat, Swaggy P. Greatly appreciate you. Barrett Downing, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, BD, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, looking forward to a more efficient offense with EB. I talked about that. I think that's the biggest thing that most of us are looking for. Is like not only just more efficiency, but scoring the football, because there have been times where we've moved the ball, you know, and you have penalties and things like that have derailed drives, but there have been times where we moved the football, amassed over 400 yards of total offense, and still didn't score a bunch of points. And so red zone efficiency has to be better, but just all in all being efficient, you know, taking advantage of some of the exploits and the talents that exist on this roster, putting guys in the best positions to succeed. That is something that I feel like Eric Bieniemy saw firsthand in Kansas City with Andy Reid. The ability to get guys the ball in situations where they're allowed to thrive. Hopefully he brings that, you know, characteristic, that trait here to Washington. Let's see. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. I got video channel rights. Welcome back, Lou. Glad to be back. Appreciate you. As always, video channel who writes, I think Curtis Samuel is in for a career year under EB. Plus, it's a contract year. I see him as a super version of McKinnon/Moore. I think he would be more like Kadarius Toney in this offense. Maybe even more like Mecole Hardman before he got hurt. But you can definitely use him in a multitude of ways. And I think he was more like he would be more like Kadarius Toney, because they used Toney in the backfield. They used him on jet sweeps. I think you can, you know, Kadarius Toney wasn't necessarily the most polished receiver. And, you know, they got him right as the season got underway. So, you know, there was only so much they could feed him from a receiver standpoint, but they knew he was a weapon and that they could just get him involved in ways he could be dangerous. And they did that. And I think that's what Curtis Samuel could be. So I could see him having a monster year under Eric Bieniemy. And Curtis was really good this past year, you know, really good. So if he, you know, takes another step, he's going to be a hard guy to retain, you know, when his contract is up, if he has a big year. But I think Curtis is a really good receiver, and we saw that last year. And with Eric Bieniemy, I can see him being even better, personally. Let's see. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Chris, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, writes, hey, Lou, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Feels good, man. Feels good. Feels good. Says, hope you enjoyed the time off and the family is good. I did. I did enjoy the time off, although I could use some sleep. I'll talk about that on the podcast tomorrow. I won't bore you with that tonight. But the family is definitely good, and it feels good. It actually feels good to be home. Feels good to be home, baby. Feels good to be home. Says, how do you see the red zone philosophy changing with Bieniemy? And will we see up-tempo, no-huddle series for big plays? I don't really know if he'll change tempos or not. I've been dying for that to be something that we implement. I'm not telling us to be this, uber aggressive, up-tempo offense that's constantly, attacking defenses by trying to get to the line of scrimmage quickly. That's not who we are. But I've been an advocate for a very long time of there's nothing wrong with going up-tempo, second possession of the game, 11 minutes and 13 seconds left in the first quarter, and you get a gain of 8 on first down, and you just go. Or you get a first down on, first down, you throw a slant to Terry, he gets 11, and you just go, right? I don't see anything wrong with that. And then you don't do it the rest of the game, or you don't do it unless you're in a 2-minute situation after that. I don't have a problem with that. Or you don't pull it back out again until there's 3 minutes and 33 seconds left in the third quarter to finish up that quarter. But we don't do those things. I'd love to see us get in a mode where you put teams on their heels. You get a look from the defense. You get certain players on the field that you feel like you can take advantage of with the guys that you have on the field, and you keep them on the field. You trap them on the field. We don't do those things. And a lot of that was based off of who we were. Our identity was we want to win time of possession. Going up tempo is counterproductive to winning time of possession. It's the direct opposite of what we were trying to do. And frankly, with what we were doing offensively, we had to probably do it that way because of our limited scoring ability and, our inability to get, chunk plays. Probably didn't need to be in hurry up anyway, but maybe EB brings some of that to the table. Red zone philosophy, I think, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the most successful red zone teams are the ones that can run the football and get into the end zone. And the Chiefs weren't always great at that. But here's the thing that they were great at. And look, a lot of it was Mahomes off schedule. Okay. How many times did we see him rolling out to his right, and right as he's about to step out of bounds, he does some magical wizardry, right? Like the flip to Clyde Edwards-Helaire against the Buccaneers for a touchdown. He did the same thing to Jerick McKinnon for a touchdown later in the season. He's masterful when he gets down there off script, right? But the Chiefs are among the most creative teams in the league when they get in the red zone. We saw the spinorama in the huddle in the Super Bowl. We saw it before that for a touchdown, maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior to that. We've seen the shovel passes. They were really the team that made that shovel pass down in the red zone a thing, where other teams start, it's a copycat league, and other teams said, shit, the Chiefs are doing it. We should do that too. Okay. Almost to the point where you're like, that shit ain't going to work now. The Chiefs wore that shit out. Everybody else is copying them now. And so you're looking for that down in the red zone. But they were the first team to really, make you think about, damn, Travis Kelce comes in short motion, and then he looks like he's about to wham block somebody. And then Mahomes at the last second just flips it to him, and he walks into the end zone. They're very creative down there, and they're running things, pick plays and things to get guys open. One thing I don't love that the Chiefs do quite a bit, I don't know if he'll be bringing that with him, is they do a lot of sprint outs, short side of the field, 3rd and 1, sprint out, 4th and 1, sprint out to one side where you're eliminating the other half of the field and you're shortening the amount of space that the defense has to cover. I hate those plays, but they ran them very effectively in Kansas City. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you get a lot of that, and you got a lot of fullback dive out of them in short yardage situations. And they got many of first downs doing that, but started to not work for them. So they switched it up in the Super Bowl. You saw split backs, which you don't see in the NFL at all anymore, and that worked to perfection. So I'm hoping you get some of that creativity from Eric Bieniemy here. But, those types of things in the red zone may change how, effective we are, because we haven't been an effective red zone offense really since 2020. I thought we were very effective because we could run the football. We didn't get down there a ton, but when we did, we made it count a lot of times in 2020. Another thing that Bieniemy, or at least the Chiefs, did a good job of was isolating and getting matchups that were favorable. Even guys like Jody Fortson were getting one-on-one matchups, and they knew what to do with it. You get size on a smaller defender, you got to take advantage of that. There's a reason Travis Kelce, and he's a hell of a route runner, and he's a big target, but the reason he's every year he's up among the league leaders in touchdown receptions. They diagram plays, they set up situations and matchups for him to win, and they give him the football. So I'm hoping that he proves to be much more creative, but also much more intentional. I felt like a lot of the shit we watched Scott Turner do didn't make sense. There was no rhyme or reason. We're just going to run a concept down here. But there was no pick play. There was no action to try to get one guy the football necessarily. It's just this guy's running a route independent of everybody else. This guy's running a route independent. Like, you're not running concepts that affect the defense and, force them to have to make a decision and somebody should be open. We're just running concepts down there. They didn't necessarily mesh with one another. Hopefully Eric Bieniemy brings a different, perspective down there, and we're starting to run things that make sense where you're trying to get a guy open. Thank you for the super chat, Chris. Greatly appreciate you. All right, got a new member. Swaggy P, stand up. You are officially the newest member of the MOBB. So glad to have you on board, Swaggy P. Look forward to chopping it up with you. Mob, y'all know what to do. Show Swaggy P some love and how we do it here in the MOBB. And look, we chop it up all the time. It'll be that much more special now that you're a member of the MOBB. Appreciate you getting on board. Look forward to chopping it up with you in the future, as always. LT, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. LT writes, Hurts top 3 to 5 quarterback when healthy? ? No. AJ and Smitty greater than Terry and JH. I'm assuming that I don't even know who the hell JH is, but maybe it's Jahan. Yeah, AJ and Smitty are better. I've said this already. The trio of receivers in Washington is greater than that of the trio of receivers in the division for any of the teams. But if you're just talking about the top two, what pushes us over the top is our third receiver is light years ahead of everybody else's third receiver. Jahan Dotson is technically our third option at receiver right now. Whereas Terry, the combination of Terry and Curtis aren't better than the combination of AJ and Devontae Smith. So, yes, if we're just talking about those two, but if you add in Quez Watkins and you add in Jahan Dotson, I'll take my 3 over those 3. So, which was the point I kept trying to make. But I feel like AJ and Terry, I think they canceled each other out. if you want to make an argument that AJ is slightly better than Terry, go right ahead. I'll listen. But I think they cancel each other out. I think Smitty gets the nod over Curtis Samuel, even though Curtis brings different things to the table. Just as a pure receiver, Devontae Smith is definitely that dude. But then Jahan, I think, essentially is going to ascend to, Smitty territory when it's all said and done. And I don't know if he'll eclipse him, but he'll be in that same conversation. And even if you were to bump Jahan up to Smitty's, category, and you can't do that because the production just isn't there. You're talking about a rookie who missed a bunch of games. We saw what he could do when he was healthy, though. And that's what, has us bullish on him. But in order for me to put him in that category, Devontae Smith just had a 1,000+ season. And similar to Terry, he almost had 1,000 in his first season. He's 9-something. He just missed out on 1,000 in his rookie year. So he's done it his first 2 years of his career. So you see where he's trending. But, if you were to reverse and put Jahan at the 2 spot, I feel like he's comparable to Smith. And then, again, Quez isn't even close to Terry or to Curtis Samuel. So I just feel like that's where we get the advantage. But those two are better as a duo right now. But I don't think Hurts is a top 3 to 5 quarterback in the league when healthy. I think he showed his ass in the Super Bowl without question. And it sparked a conversation. But there are at least 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the AFC alone that you take before Jalen Hurts. And again, I'm big on do it again. Hey, that shit was cute. Do it again. So now he's got to prove to me that wasn't a one-off. Do it again. And if he does that, and now with no Shane Steichen, I'm anxious to see what the Eagles do in terms of replacing their offensive coordinator. And then I want to see how that new guy calls plays for Jalen Hurts. Or do they just kind of keep the same, energy that they had last year where he was, ultra successful? Or does somebody come in there and kind of change things up a bit? We'll see. Kevin, the PRF, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Kevin, the PRF writes, all I know is our O-line is about to get their feelings hurt. And they're going to have to tighten up. That is for sure. And they got to also upgrade. Like, the shit that we have just isn't good enough. So clearly that's got to be a point of emphasis this offseason. And I think it will be. I don't feel like they feel good about the offensive line like they did last year. So I don't think that's something that we have to really worry about. But I wouldn't put anything past this organization, but I think they're going to figure it out. John Livingston, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, JL Smooth. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, what up, Lou? What's up, John? Says, hope all is well. Likewise. So what's the plan at quarterback for y'all? Sam taking the reins or going after Lamar, A-Rod, or Carr? Please steal Carr from the Jets. NFL going to adopt XFL kickoffs. Rumors. Not sure what the NFL is going to do. Every year when one of these alternate leagues come, and they've got sometimes they have some good ideas, there's always, is the NFL going to try to adopt this? We think this is pretty cool. And the NFL usually doesn't. So we'll see what they decide to do with some of the things that may come up. But Carr is definitely not coming to Washington. I don't see that being a thing. I think he ends up in either New Orleans or I think he ends up in New Orleans or New York with the Jets. Tampa Bay is a long shot. They're a dark horse, but I think it's between the Saints and the Jets. And I think he would prefer to stay in the AFC to have an opportunity to stick it to the Raiders, even though it's not the same division. But I think the Jets make a whole hell of a lot of sense for a guy like that. But I'll talk more about that on the podcast tomorrow for sure. Right now, the plan is Sam Howell. Speaking of which, one of the rumors, and we'll hear more about this on Thursday. I mean, if I'm a member of the media and they're taking questions, which usually you do at these pressers when you're being introduced, I'm going to ask him, did Sam Howell play a part in you being intrigued by this job? Because there was a rumor out there that Sam Howell was part of the reason that he was interested in this job. So that says a lot about what he thinks Sam Howell can be in this league. But I'd like to hear that from him personally. Sam Howell's got talent. There's no denying that, Is he good enough to be consistent in this league? A lot of talented quarterbacks have come through this league and not bust a great. So talent doesn't really mean squat unless you're doing something with it. So, yes, right now, as far as we're concerned, Sam Howell is the guy. They're going to bring in a veteran, whether it's running it back with Taylor Heineke or they go out and get some other veteran. They're going to bring in a guy to compete with him. But it's his job to lose. I'll just say that. Now, could we be shocked and could we end up with Aaron Rodgers? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Rodgers I don't think he's going to be traded to an NFC team, personally. I think it's Vegas or bust for him. Maybe, and the Jets are keeping tabs on the situation. Fine. It'd be the second former Packers Hall of Fame quarterback to go from Green Bay to the Jets, but I don't see him going there. I think he's going to Vegas to team up with Devontae Adams, his former teammate, closer to home. It makes a ton of sense. And Green Bay gets him out of the conference, which is what they ultimately want if he's not going to be in Green Bay. So I don't think Washington is on the radar for either one of those quarterbacks. And then Lamar, I just don't think he's going to end up anywhere else but Baltimore. But again, it's Lion season. Anything goes. But literally the Ravens have built their entire roster and specifically their offense around the skill set of Lamar Jackson. You get rid of him, you better be damn sure that you've got a guy waiting in the wings to come in and be able to do the things that Lamar Jackson can do. And there aren't many in the league that can say, I can do what Lamar Jackson is capable of doing. Again, you could draft Anthony Richardson. I've already made the case for you get to draft day, Richardson sitting there, someone's offering you, 2 1s, 2 2s, and a 4, or, 2 1s, a 2, a 4, and a couple of players, and you're like, it's a pretty damn good deal. And I could just draft Anthony Richardson. That could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. And even if it did happen, I don't think Washington would be on the other end of that deal. So, yes, to answer your question, Sam Howell, I think, is the guy in Washington. For the time being, again, things can change. Let's see. Got another super chat. This one is from Fat American. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Fat American writes, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. I was wondering who to root for in the XFL. Then I saw my boy G-Dub on the sidelines coaching up the D for the Defenders. Immediately sold. Let's go. Hey, I don't know if Greg will ever get back in the NFL after that last fiasco he had with the Jets. But, I like yourself, I'm a Greg Williams guy. So good for him to have some sort of work and keep the checks coming. And you get to stay around the game you love, even though it's not at the highest level. John Perez, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy. JP writes, welcome back, Lou. Appreciate you, JP, as always, man. Thank you. Hope the time away helped. It definitely did. I'm stoked to have EB as our coordinator. That was the guy I wanted. He'll get a lot out of Howell and these speedy wide receivers. Feel like we need Gesicki, though. Again, I don't think they're going to go down that road, and I don't think we need Gesicki. He'd be cool to add if there's no Logan Thomas, but I'm actually intrigued by both of the young receivers going into their second season, and Cole Turner and Amani Rodgers. And so I think if there's no Logan Thomas, then you need to do something at tight end, whether it be draft a guy or free agency. But I still am really intrigued by the skill set that both of those guys bring to the table. So not necessarily advocating for drafting a tight end nor going after one in free agency. I just think we didn't maximize that particular skill group last year for whatever reason. And I think if given the right situation, and I'm hoping Eric Bieniemy brings that about, I think you'll get more out of that position than you did last year. So I'm hoping that we'll get more out of these receivers. We ran so many mesh concepts, and we were just so basic and bland offensively. It was frustrating to watch. So I'm hoping he's going to get more out of this offense, specifically those receivers. And maybe, Sam will be maximized in this offense. We'll see. JP, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy, John Perez, writes, I want to see EB get Gibson in a Jerick McKinnon type role if they want to maximize his talents, as do I. I think that they can do that. And I think you could even expand upon it, even though I think McKinnon is a really good pass catcher. McKinnon was a former quarterback in college. Like, Gibson's a former wide receiver. Like, you should be able to get him one-on-one matched up with a backer or a safety, and you should win that matchup, specifically against a backer. Like we did in week 1 against Jacksonville when he ran the corner route. Now, it was against zone and he was wide open. I don't care. You should be running more routes like that down the field. So I'd love to see if EB can, and the reason I'm hopeful is because Antonio Gibson's a running back, and EB's position of expertise is running backs. So if anybody's able to get the most out of the backs that we have, it's going to be Eric Bieniemy. Thank you for that super chat, JP. Got another one here from Fat American. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Fat American, who writes, it's crazy seeing how the Chiefs offense functions. Like grown-ass men. Us getting EB feels like when your favorite big bro, the Chiefs, gives you his MVP game ball. The Chiefs are a legitimate NFL outfit, and they do things the right way, which is what has led to their success over the better part of the last decade. I mean, remember how good they were before Patrick Mahomes entered the lineup. They were really good with Alex Smith, and they were winning double-digit games and winning the division just about every year before Mahomes took over. Remember, the reason Mahomes didn't play in his rookie season until week 17 was because Alex Smith got off to like a 5 or 6-0 start that year in 2017. And they were winning a bunch of ball games before, the tables turned and they started losing games. But they made it to the playoffs just about every year, won a game. They got beaten think 17 by the Titans, if I'm not mistaken. And that was when they realized we probably need to make the switch to Mahomes and get rid of Alex Smith. But I just feel good about getting a guy that's coming from a program like that. You know, he had to have learned something being in that environment. Had to. I find it almost impossible for him not to have picked up some tricks of the trade, some, things here and there. And obviously he's got his own style, but, kind of meshing together some of the things he learned under Andy Reid and some of the other coaches on that staff, some of the ideas that they had, some of the concepts that they ran. I find it hard to believe that he didn't pick up on some of those things and is going to bring that to Washington with him. I find it hard to believe that that's not going to be the case. So, JP, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy. John Perez writes, once the sale is finalized and Snyder is gone, will FedEx immediately start selling out games? No. So what you'll gain in Snyder selling is you'll gain a lot of the fans back. I shouldn't say a lot. Some of the fans back that swore they weren't going to any games until Dan Snyder was no longer the owner of the team. These are the people that have been keeping up with what's going on, not necessarily as diehard as they used to be, but they're keeping up with what's going on with the team, keeping tabs on them. And if they're winning, they're in 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They're losing, they just go about their business and don't spend a ton of time invested in the outcome of these games. That said, there's still a portion of the fan base that can't get over the fact that the team's no longer named Redskins. There's another portion of the fan base that's just over the team at this point. And no matter what changes are made, unless they start winning, like there's no more blind faith. There's no more benefit of the doubt. He killed all of that. Now you want us to come back and cheer and be loud and create a home field environment and advantage. You have to win and win big in order to pull people back in. So I don't think it's an automatic uptick in, fans coming out to support the team because Snyder sells. I think you will have, the first game or two of the season, especially if it's against a divisional opponent or something like that, you'll get a bump, I think, early on. But if they're not good, that shit's gonna fade. People don't give a shit if you're not winning. And all of the excitement for this team, we had a bunch of losing seasons before, and they were still just as passionate and loyal. That's gone now. You've got to restore that, and just getting rid of Daniel Snyder isn't going to do that alone. You've got to couple winning and winning big with that in order to get people to come back to FedEx and be supportive. So. Metaphor, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Metaphor, writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Metaphor? Tight end Curtis Hodges. That's the name I was trying to think of. I couldn't. His name just was drawing the biggest blank ever. But Curtis Hodges, they liked him too. So I think there's some stuff at tight end, man. And cautiously excited about EB, unlike all these analysts hating on him. It's Washington hate. They love EB as an OC in Arizona. I think so. I was watching, and I generally don't do this, but I was taking in a lot of shit that I normally don't because I don't care. But when it comes to my team, I've got an open ear. I'm not oblivious to what's being said or what's going on. And so I was watching Game Theory with Bomani Jones. He's got a show on HBO. I've never watched it. And he was talking about, the job. And he had some guy I'd never seen before up there that he was talking with. And, they were talking about, Bieniemy taking a lateral move to go be the offensive coordinator in Washington. But Bomani Jones essentially was like, not only are you taking a lateral move to become an offensive coordinator where you no longer have Patrick Mahomes as your safety blanket, but you're going to Washington with a guy named Sam Howell, who most people have never heard of, and you're staking your career and potential advancement to the head coaching position on that guy, doesn't seem fair, is essentially how they kind of termed it. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of that perception that you go from Mahomes to who? Sam Howell. There's a lot of that going on. And again, people that make that claim or feel that way, not wrong. They're not necessarily right either, but only time will tell, only time will tell. Would they love him somewhere else as an offensive coordinator? I think the same conversation would have been had regardless of where he ended up. If it was an offensive coordinator position, it was going to be a problem because it should have been a head coaching position. However, if he would have been paired with, say, Justin Herbert in LA with the Chargers, they needed an offensive coordinator. They ended up going with Kellen Moore, former Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator. But let's say that job was open and Bieniemy took it, and you go to Justin Herbert. They may be complaining about him not getting the job, but they're like, bro, he got Justin Herbert. He's going to be able to do some things with that dude in that offense. That's not the feeling that people have about Washington, and in particular, Sam Howell. Because I think most people that are watching the league closely, they see what we got at receiver. They see what we got at running back. They understand that there's some talent there. But don't nobody trust none of the quarterbacks that we've been putting on the field, and I don't blame them. So Sam Howell, to most people, and again, we do this all the time. You put guys in a box based on where they were drafted. If Sam Howell were a first-round pick, we're not having this discussion. Hell, if Sam Howell was a second-round pick, we're not having this discussion, which is what a lot of people, myself included, had him graded as second-round pick. The fact that he was a fifth-round pick, it's easy for people to dismiss him. So, we'll see what happens. All right, let's see. Washington football fan, WGIL, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, welcome home, Lou. Glad to be home, man. Feels good. He says, would you shout out at Jared Taylor? He won't smash likes. He thinks you ignore him. LOL. I mean, look. Jared probably hasn't been here very long. If he has, then he knows how, this process works. I can't force anybody to hit the like button. All I can do is encourage you to touch the like button. Hasn't done anything wrong to you. It's actually really nice. And it's free. So why not? But if Jared is upset because he's, leaving comments and I'm not reading them or things of that nature, there are other programs where if you want to have your voice heard, that you can. And again, super chats take precedence. And if it's not a super chat, I just keep it going, keep it pushing. So, Jared, if you're out there, hey, I appreciate you for checking out the stream, and continuing to support. You might be one of the people that hit the thumbs down button. It's never 100% like rate. It's always one or two people that don't like the video. You could be one of them, and that's fine too. Whatever the case may be, I just appreciate you giving me your time, energy and, supporting the movement. So thank you for that, at Jared Taylor. If you could please hit the like button. Victor Word, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, Victor. I'm gonna look for a comment from you. If I find one, I will read it. Thank you, Victor Word. Quentin Ruiz, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy Quentin writes, EB reminds me of Pop. Pop style built a dynasty. We'll see. Pop is definitely no nonsense. And so it works for some, not for all. But also, it's a lot easier to do those things when you're winning, a la Bill Belichick. I would liken Pop to more of a Bill Belichick type. First you got to get the success. Once you get the success, then you can be a hard ass and point to your success and your rings and say, hey, this is the way we do it here. And if you buy in, we can win. Bieniemy was a part of a machine in Kansas City, but just because you were a part of the machine doesn't mean that you're going to take what you learned and be able to implement. We've seen coaches, specifically in New England's case, fail time after time after time after departing New England, trying to implement the Patriot way elsewhere and having it fall flat on their face because you're not Bill Belichick. So there's no guarantees in this thing. We'll just see what happens. Duncan Wright, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Duncan writes, what up, man? You gonna give Jalen top 3 status or me and you going round and round all off season long with just the info Lord Brunson give? I got this, man. We could go tit for tat. I mean, he's not a top 3 quarterback. He's not better than Josh Allen. He's not better than Joe Burrow. He's not better than Patrick Mahomes. Boom, bing, bang, boom. He's not better than Justin Herbert. Okay? I'll take any one of those dudes before I take Jalen Hurts 15 times over. And like I said, there's still a couple of young boys that I'd take over him as well, including Trevor Lawrence. But again, the consistency piece is what's going to do it for me. I need to see it because, look, you don't have to have a rifle for an arm, but it helps in this league. And y'all remember the longest yard? I think his name was Frankie. The guy was like, I want to play quarterback. I can play quarterback. And he said, all right, throw me the ball. And he throws and he says, why can't I play quarterback? And he throws the pass like 3 yards straight into the ground. And he said, that's why. Now shut up. That's kind of how I felt about Jalen Hurts on that Hail Mary at the end of the game, on the end of the Super Bowl. What the hell was that shit, right? Again, that doesn't define you as a quarterback. It doesn't make you a great quarterback, but it sure does help when you can be off platform and sling it, with the flick of the wrist, 20, 30 yards down the field, pinpoint accurate, which he can't do. There's just some things that some of these guys in the league can do that he just can't. But that Super Bowl performance, again, it's one for the ages. It's probably the greatest Super Bowl performance we've ever seen from a losing quarterback in NFL history. I haven't seen every Super Bowl, and I don't know every losing performance from quarterbacks. but I've watched plenty of Super Bowls. That was 57. I've watched at least 30 to 33 of those Super Bowls. Never seen anything like that from a losing quarterback. And we've seen some really good performances from losing quarterbacks, but not like Hurts' performance. I need to see it again, though. Not necessarily that performance, but just the season overall. He was fantastic. All right, do it again. Especially now that you don't have your coordinator. Do it again. We'll see. But we can go back and forth all offseason. I'm here. You know where to find me. Zay or Z. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, do you prefer Hardee's, Wendy's, or Arby's vegan menu selection? None of the above. First of all, if you're really vegan, you're not eating food from a fast food establishment. The closest thing to fast food that you're grabbing as a vegan is probably more of Moe's, Chipotle, or Qdoba or something like that. You know, it's usually more like Chipotle, but you're definitely not eating anything off of any of those menus. Throw Burger King in there. They had the Impossible Whopper. Not eating that shit. Anyway. Spence Kalis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, EB smells like winning. Time will tell, but excited. Hell yes. Hell yes. Yeah, that stench that you smell. Did you see the thumbnail? See that big ass rock he's got on his finger? That's called a Super Bowl ring. He wore that intentionally. Most guys that win Super Bowls, they don't wear the ring. You know they won a Super Bowl. He did that intentionally. And I'm pretty sure Ron every now and again breaks out his 80, which probably looks like a prehistoric ring compared to the shits that they're getting now. His ring probably looks like it was made in the 1960s. But you bust that thing out every now and again to remind them this is what you play for. You know, this is what it looks like when you win the ultimate prize. Eric Bieniemy showed up with that ring on his finger for a reason. I wouldn't be shocked if he's got it on again during his press conference or the first time that he engages with some of the players on the team, he's got it on just to remind them that, look, this is what you're chasing. This is what you're after. Listen to me. I can get you there. All right. Here's the proof. Okay. I know what winning looks like. So EB definitely smells like winning. That stench is all over him. Now I need him to somehow transfer that shit over to the rest of the organization. Rocky D, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Rocky D writes, what's up, fellow Monarch? What's good? You know what it is. You can kiss the number one time of possession goodbye. Kansas City, I believe, was 12th. If we score points, it wouldn't matter. That's my whole thing is that was out of necessity. Time of possession and what we did to Philadelphia when we beat them, like that was something that we had to do because we weren't capable of going toe-to-toe, tit for tat with an explosive offense. So what do? You take the air out of the football. You keep an explosive offense on the sidelines, and you control the pace of the game and the clock. Shorten it, lower the amount of possessions for each team, and that's how you win the ball game. And it doesn't hurt to force 4 turnovers or whatever that number was in that game. But I'm not looking for time of possession victories. That's cool if you can get it, but I'm looking for the win on the scoreboard. How many games did we win time of possession and still lose to get that goddamn game? Plenty of them. I don't give a shit about time of possession. I just want to win where it matters most, and that's on the scoreboard. So if we're scoring more points, time of possession doesn't become as big of a factor. So, which you understand. Brian N., Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Brian, writes, welcome back, Lou. Appreciate it, Brian, man. Thank you so much. Feels good. I'm feeling the love from y'all, man. It feels good. Feels good. All right. Feels all warm and cozy over here, man. I'm feeling the love, man. I appreciate y'all. I missed y'all. I'm not going to lie. You know, when he got hired, I was like, man, I should be doing a video right now. But I knew that was going to happen. I told you, I said, he's going to be hired when I'm gone. Sucks, but that's the way it was trending. And then I found out Ron had said, I want this to be wrapped up before the weekend. I'm like, okay, well, that means he's probably getting hired on Friday. And he did. I think it was Friday. Why the hell did it take so long? Why did they need like 2 or 3 days to interview him and like woo him? Like, I didn't feel like it should have been that. And maybe it was more about Bieniemy not sure he wanted to commit here, where they were like, hey, look, bro, if you want the job, it's yours. And he was kind of like on the fence and they had to convince him or something. I don't know. It just seemed like it took unnecessarily long, but whatever the case may be. It says, any offensive FAs from the Chiefs you have your eyes on? I don't think they have any free agents that I am intrigued by. I saw a list that was put together. I think it was by, either the SB Nation affiliate, which is Hogs Haven, or it was Rigo's Rag. It was one of the two. I don't know. I don't remember where I saw it. But they had a list of 4 Chiefs that would make sense for Washington to go after if they should be available via free agency. And I didn't agree with any of them. Obviously, at the top of the list was their left tackle, Orlando Brown, which I don't see the Chiefs allowing to walk. If they got to franchise tag him again and try to work something out, they're going to. He's asking for a ridiculous amount of money, which I just wouldn't be comfortable paying him here in Washington. But they gave up the draft capital with Baltimore to get him. I think by virtue of that, you got to be willing to pay what it costs to keep him. The next guy was I can't remember, but I know Mecole Hardman was one and Valdez-Scantling. Well, I was like, why would we need any of their receivers? And first of all, Mecole Hardman literally just had surgery on his groin today. Why would I want to touch him with a 10-foot pole? I'd like to know what kind of sense does that make, unless you're getting him for dirt cheap. Valdez-Scantling just signed a 3-year deal with them last offseason now. They could be looking to cut costs and feel like, hey, with the emergence of Sky Moore, you probably could get Juju Smith-Schuster back on a 1-year deal or 2-3-year deal that's not super expensive. Don't need Valdez-Scantling making, I don't know, $11, $12 million a year. Don't need that on the books. We have a guy that looks like him, not necessarily at his level, but we have a guy that looks like him. His name is De'Ami Brown. We don't need him. I don't think either one of those receivers make a big difference. And then I totally blank. Oh, Jerick McKinnon was the other guy. Now, I would be in support of that, especially if J.D. McKissick's best days are behind him. I would love Jerick McKinnon, but you know how I'm a sucker for Jerick McKinnon. You know, he's one of my favorite players in the league, so I'm kind of biased when it comes to that. So I guess that one, I shouldn't be allowed to answer that one because you know how I feel about him. Anyway, I would be interested in him. So that would be one of the guys, I guess. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Red Wings 01 writes, good to have you back, Lou. Good to be back, man. Good to be back. Appreciate you. He writes, building off of what Brian said, I've seen names like Orlando Brown and receivers like Hartman, Pringle, Sammy Watkins, but I think Brown's too pricey and our wide receiver room is crowded. So Pringle is in Chicago with the Bears. Watkins is now a member of the Packers. Again, Hartman, I saw Hartman, I saw Valdez-Scantling, Orlando Brown, and Jerick McKinnon as the 4 options. None of them really, to me, fit other than Jerick McKinnon, because we could use a back like him. He's really good in pass protection, and he could fill that J.D. McKissick role perfectly on this team. Brown is, I already said, he's too expensive. You agree, obviously. And we don't need any of their receivers. We have receivers here in Washington. At a bare minimum, our top 4 receivers from last year are going to be back. I don't know about Cam Sims, and I don't know about Dax Milne. But at a bare minimum, Terry, Curtis, Jahan, and Diami are back next year. So you already got 4 receivers just like that. I don't feel like you need to be spending any free agent dollars. If you want another receiver, you go in the draft, get a guy cheap labor, and you go about it that way. But I digress. Liberty and Hercules. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Liberty and Hercules writes, I see us winning more than 9 this year, Louie. That'd be great. But last year was my year, right? That was the year that I was bullish. I went against the grain of what I normally do. I'm usually really mild with my predictions for this team because, 1, we don't have a quarterback, and 2, I didn't necessarily love, coaching and things of that. So, and then, just the cloud of Dan hanging over this, franchise. It's just hard to see us winning 10, 11, 12 games, doing something we hadn't done since 91. Last year was the year that I thought we could catch lightning in the bottle or just be really good because of the schedule and how things could fall in place for us. And unfortunately, it didn't happen, and if we couldn't take advantage of the schedule like everybody else in the division did, and, we couldn't win 10, 11 games last season, I definitely don't see that happening this year. 9 is even tough because the schedule is better, but you get solid play out of the defense, and we can't be assured of that. We thought we were getting good defensive play in 2021, and it was an abject disaster. So we can't even be assured that you're going to follow up 2022's defensive performance with another one of those that give you a chance to win. And we didn't do a lot of special things defensively. It wasn't all that complex. Guys just didn't make plays. Sometimes we made plays, and the ball bounced our way. You got some calls, or you didn't have things called on you, whatever the case may be. I don't know if we can duplicate some of that stuff. And there were games I went back and watched where I'm like, man, they dropped passes, they missed open receivers. Like, that wasn't anything our defense did. Jacksonville game, Green Bay game, those games in particular come to mind where the opposition pretty much imploded and gave us an opportunity to win. The Atlanta game, I think about that ball doesn't get – if Atlanta just keeps running the football, they're going to win the game. Why are you even throwing the football in that situation? Why? Where's the psychological sense in that? Just run it. And he was open, and it would have been a touchdown if Deron Payne doesn't bat it in the air. So, think about the Bears game, and, man, Justin Fields was awful in that game as a passer. Awful. If he doesn't miss – first of all, he threw the ball off the helmet of his teammate, which is the one Jonathan Allen picked off. He missed a wide open tight end on that final possession of the game for them offensively. That was an easy touchdown. He missed him by a mile. Open receivers on third downs, and he just doesn't see him. Easy, pitch and catch type stuff. He just doesn't see him. And so we got away with some shit, man. Last season, as much as I would love to give this defense a ton of credit, we got away with some shit that if we were playing better quarterbacks, better teams, we're not getting away with that shit. So I don't even know what to make of this defense. let alone using the offense as a barometer to say that we're going to win 9 games. We're winning more than 9 games. I hope you're right, just so you know. Washington Football Enjoyer. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Washington Football Enjoyer writes, De'Ami Brown can run really fast in a straight line. And for the first time in 5 years with Sam, we can actually benefit from a player who can do that. I mean, Carson threw him some dimes in that Titans game, right? Carson threw some dimes in that first game of the season against Jacksonville. You know, Terry down the sideline for the touchdown. I wouldn't necessarily categorize the Jahan game winner as a dime, but he gave him a chance. Sam, though, in that game against Dallas, had some dimes, specifically the Terry one down the sideline, and what wasn't terrible coverage, but that's just a perfect throw. So I think a guy like De'Ami is possibly the biggest beneficiary of Eric Bieniemy coming over if he can show that he's ready for more opportunities, because when you go 4 deep, it's hard to cover the third and fourth receivers on the field. You know, if you've got 1 and 2 being guys that command a ton of attention, which we do, you know, especially if Jahan, you know, is what I think he is. De'Ami, I felt like he could do this last year. I was like, De'Ami should be eating, you know, with what we're going to put on the field offensively at the receiver position. De'Ami should be an afterthought. But only 1 week last season was he even on the radar. So, but he had a nice catch against Atlanta. I talked about that on that first drive that led to the touchdown. He had a huge catch on that drive. And then he had a nice catch, I want to say, right before halftime against Philadelphia to set up the field goal that Joey Sly banged home from like 56. So he had some good catches. I think he would be the biggest beneficiary of Eric Bieniemy coming over, though. We'll see. And to your point, Sam Howell throwing the football. Red Wing 01, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Red Wing 01 writes, I know you don't really care about these alt leagues like the XFL and the USFL, but I see more opportunity for more players, coaches, execs, etc. Nothing wrong with more football. Plus, XFL got a good DC team, so I can stay invested. You're right. I don't care about these alt leagues. However, I'm not going to shit on them. I'm not going to poo-poo them. And you know, like, the NFL needs a minor league system. It does. They had NFL Europa, you know, once upon a time. And, it spawned guys like Kurt Warner to come over here and ultimately become a Hall of Fame player. And so it had its benefits, but it's the only major, sport in the U.S. that does not have some sort of farm system. And so if you can use these leagues, these alt leagues, as essentially a way to scout some of these players, and again, the same rules don't apply in these alt leagues, so you got to be careful with how some of their, performances translate. But if a guy's an athlete, if a guy can play, he can play. If he's an athlete, he's an athlete. You don't need to be able to see it on an NFL field to know. But I think it's a good thing having these alt leagues if they can stay afloat. That's been the issue the last 2 or 3 years, is that they come along, they, cause a bit of a stir, and there's a bit of intrigue, and then boom, they're gone. Like the AAF, XFL twice. So let's see if this third iteration is any good. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. What up, Ben's Coop? Video channel. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, I can see EB drafting a quarterback on day 3, maybe late day 2. Howell plus Rook plus Vet should be the setup. Vet should be Minshew, in my opinion. Let them boys compete. I personally don't care who the veteran is. If it's not Heineke, I don't care. I prefer it to be Heineke. If it's not him, I don't really give a damn who it is. Sam should beat him out, and that's the way it should be. I think the Vet Rook how setup is optimal, but will it go down that way? I'm not sure. And I need to clarify one thing. Like, Eric Bieniemy isn't in control of the draft. You know, he may have some input, but if this job serves the purpose that it's supposed to serve, do you really want input from a guy that could be here 1, maybe 2 years if things go well? You really want him picking players that you may not have any use for when he's no longer here? So, you know what is interesting though, which you kind of jogged my memory a bit. So one of the hangups with the deal. Remember, I was like, well, what was taking them so long? One of the hangups of the deal that I heard is that EB was trying to see what he could do from a staff standpoint. Like, how many of my guys can I bring in here? And Washington has already lost Haas, their I forgot what title he had. He used to be the receivers coach, and then they turned that over to Drew Terrell. And now he's in Arizona as the offensive coordinator. So some guys got poached. We'll see what they decide to do. But I think Eric Bieniemy is going to bring in a few members of, former colleagues or guys that he believes in to add to this staff. We need a wide receivers coach now. I mean, they could promote from within, but the 2 guys that were our last 2 wide receivers coaches that were here, they're now gone. Haas isn't back, and Drew Terrell isn't back, and you already lost Chris Harris. So, and obviously he's on the defensive side, but we'll see what happens, man. I'm intrigued by all of this. JP, my guy, John Perez, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, we need to draft a partner in crime for St. Juice in that secondary at 16. Either Gonzalez from Oregon, Witherspoon from Illinois, or Porter from PSU, which is Penn State University. I think one of the 3 will be there. That's my personal take. I don't think all 3 of them will be gone by 16. Gonzalez, to me, is the most likely candidate to still be there, as I could see 2 corners going in the first 15 picks. Shit, I could see 2 corners going in the first, 7 picks, 10 picks. So I don't think all 3 of those options will exist, and I don't think that they're necessarily going to take a corner. Again, we'll see what happens. I think corner is very logical at 16. But as we get deeper into the draft process, we'll be able to identify, obviously free agency happens, what we do there will have some impact and bearing on what you do at 16, whether you trade back, trade up, stand pat, and what do you do if you stay there. But it'll be interesting to see how they attack the secondary, because technically speaking, you don't need a boundary corner, especially if you feel good about what Danny Johnson did at the end of the season, which I do. Technically, the issue is inside, not outside. Kendall Fuller, probably the most consistent defender we had last season. He was the only one that had picks. And he didn't have one, but 2 pick sixes. We don't get pick sixes here in Washington. He had 2 of them in one season. So I don't even know if they're looking at boundary corners like we are. They may be just looking for a slot. Mike Jank, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB who writes size. What's up, Lou? Long time no see. What's going on, Mike Jank? Hey, your boys put up one hell of a fight, man. And I ain't gonna lie to you. Right before halftime, I think you were up 20 to 10 or something like that. At that point of the game, it was looking pretty damn good, man. I'm not gonna bullshit you. With Mahomes getting the injury too, it was shaping up, looking like you guys were gonna hoist the Lombardi, but clearly that is not what the football gods had in the plans for you. But it's always good to talk to you, Mike. I would have heard from you a lot sooner had you guys won, though. But it's all good. I ain't tripping. When you lose games like that, those hurt. Luck, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Luck, writes, I think he meant Hardee's, Wendy's, and RD's. Good one. Good one. That's a good one. Let's see. You stupid, man. I swear. The Phillies Ace 34, my guy. The Phillies Ace 34. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, my guy Louie, real talk. I hope EB does a good job for y'all. Let's see if he can emerge out of Reedsville shadow. Shady said it was more Reed, so let's see. Again, take what Shady says with a grain of salt. I think he was just Shady being Shady, real salty. And, I just think it's dangerous to assume that a coach hasn't grown in 3 years. You were there in 2019. It's not like you were there with him for 4 years like Jamal Charles was, or you were there with him as coordinator for 3 years. You were there for 1 year, in his second year, and some of the things you saw may not have lent itself to you feeling like he's head coaching or even offensive coordinator material, but that was 4 years ago, bro. Man's, I would hope, done some developing, and he's grown, and he's more comfortable in his skin, and he's more vocal. I would hope those things have transpired since 2019, but anyway, we'll see. The good thing is, this is a win-win for Washington. If he's good offensively, we're good, means we got a shot. If he's bad, Ron's gone, he's probably gone, and we're going to mash the reset button. Don't know if that involves getting a quarterback or what our pick's going to be, but do think that is going to be important. So, Luck, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy Luck writes, can you shout out Jalen's biggest wife too? It's angry. I don't know if you're talking about Jalen's future wifey. We've chopped it up before. I don't know if you're trying to get me on that or what, but Jalen's future wifey, not biggest. Okay. I appreciate y'all, man. I'm feeling the love tonight, man. You know, I know I was gone. I know I was gone for a few days. It felt like a lot longer. And usually I'm around when big news happens. I wasn't this time around. And so felt like I was missing a lot. But I'm glad you guys were happy and excited to have me back. And sometimes when you're not around, when things happen, when they first happen, now your opinion isn't necessarily relevant anymore. Your take isn't relevant. So feels good to know that shit's still relevant, a few days later. But got another super chat here on the way out. And I did want to tie everything in to Rivera here on the way out. So I'll do that before I go. Mike Jenk, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy Mike Jenk writes, opinion on the Bradbury call. So clearly you didn't watch the show at the end or after the game. And it probably was too painful for you to watch. But I made it abundantly clear. It was the right call. I agreed with the call. He impeded the receiver. He even said it himself. It actually was an unpopular take from me. A lot of people that were watching that stream and even afterwards said, you're tripping, bro. You're one of the few people that think it was a flag. You can't throw that flag in that situation. And I'm like, why not? It's a flag. If he doesn't tug on his jersey, that's a 3rd and 7. He's going to get free, and Mahomes is going to put it out away from Bradbury and he's up the field, and he's probably going to get the first down anyway. So he had to hold him. But I also said that in that situation, I would prefer, and the game, the way it was called, I'm a big consistency guy. If you've been calling it, continue to call it. If you haven't, it needs to be egregious, right? To the point where you say you have to throw that flag. I thought they could have not called it. They had been not calling a lot. Like, we didn't have any real pass interferences throughout the game. It was a lot of, black and white penalties, offsides, hands to the face, illegal man downfield, stuff like that, where it's clear, offensive pass interference. Guy went and blocked too early. We saw that, right? This was one of the few gray area judgment calls of the game, and it just happened to come at the biggest point of the game. He got away with that earlier in the game on the 3rd down, and I said, hey, you just got away with some shit. He didn't get away with it then. So, anyway. The Phillies Ace 34. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, Louie, baseball season is coming. Don't wear Atlanta hats when y'all play for my Phillies. My Phillies need to make up for losing the World Series, but you're the man. The Braves hats are going to come out here shortly. As soon as we, once the Grizzlies are done, I'm probably rocking a lot of Grizzlies hats as we start to near the playoffs in the NBA. But we getting close. Spring training has started. We're getting close to baseball season. And, once that happens, I'm going to bust out the A's. We've got a really good squad this year again. So have you seen the new bases? They look like pizza boxes. Shit is crazy, but anyway, I digress. That's gonna do it for me, your man Louie T. Oh, let me just talk about Rivera real quick. I said I wanted to do this. What this hire means for Ron Rivera, to me, it has the ability to save his job if he's right. Conversely, and this is why, as a fan, I feel like you can't lose here. Same thing with Rivera. Although there's a lot for him to lose. There's no or for him. If Bieniemy's good, more likely than not, he's good and he's around again in 2024. There's no or. If he's not good, he's fired. So this is a big decision for Ron Rivera. And we talked about it. And I said, this is a big offseason. And we're going to talk about that on Thursday. He better be right. He better be right about Eric Bieniemy. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with y'all on Thursday. We will hear from Eric Bieniemy for the very first time as the Washington Commanders' new offensive coordinator / assistant head coach. Really anxious to see what the message is from him and what they disclose about this process and what he says about, what he plans on doing here, what his philosophical approach might be. He may not give us all of that. What he thinks of Sam Howell, what he thinks about the receivers and some of the skill players that are here, and what attracted him to the job the most. We're going to hear most of that on Thursday, so we'll have a lot to sink our teeth into. I'm looking forward to it. Bart Scott! Can't wait. Until then, I'm your man Louie T, signing off. I'll see you guys on Thursday. For the rest of you who are interested, we'll be live for the LouieTeeNetwork podcast. I've got some stories to tell about my trip. We got a lot of stuff to talk about in the world of the NFL. So hopefully you'll be able to join me tomorrow. In any event, you guys get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Look forward to chopping it up with you guys down the road. Until then, God bless and good night.
Louie T Network.